John Zogby is the founder of the Zogby Poll and the Zogby Companies and is an internationally respected pollster, opinion leader, and best-selling author. John's newest book is the self-published First Globals, Understanding, Managing, and Unleashing the Potential of Our Millennial Generation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Zogby.
I was commissioned 12 years ago to do a series of polls for this wonderful New York-based group called the Foreign Policy Association. They put on the great debates in communities all over the country. They wanted to have some sort of context as to where the American people stood on a wide variety of foreign policy related issues. And so we did a series of 3 polls. So a sample of 3,000 Americans, and altogether about 150 questions were asked. Attitudes towards various countries and regions and cultures, the role of the United States in the rest of the world, our relationship with allies and NGOs like the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and so on. Is American culture inherently superior to the cultures of the rest of the world? What about immigration and free trade? You get the picture. This was wide-ranging and huge in terms of a project. And so as I was analyzing the results, 2002 and 2003, overall, not surprisingly, when it came to almost every issue, the country was pretty much split down the middle. It always is. However, what I couldn't help but notice was that when I looked at Americans who were 30 years of age and older, there was fundamental agreement on almost every issue, give or take 5, 7, 8 points, but all kind of in the same park. And then radically different, dramatically different, on virtually everything, were those Americans who were 18 to 29 years of age. And the icing on the cake was one question that I asked for the very first time, and then I have asked in every poll I've done here and all over the world since. What best explains who you are? A resident of your city or village, an American citizen, or a citizen of the planet Earth? And this was the only group, the 18 to 29-year-olds, who had as many likely to say, I'm a citizen of the planet Earth, as I am an American citizen. That made me look at this group. They are different at some point in their lives, and whatever that cataclysmic event or events may be, that is what defines their values and their worldview, and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives. And so very simply, these 20-somethings are like all other 20-somethings, except they have had 2 cataclysmic events which have defined who they are. The first is 9/11, and that's obvious. And it's clear, you know, if we're talking about those born between 1979 and 1994, incidentally, 72 million strong, the second largest age cohort after we baby boomers. But this is a group, let's picture them, prior to 9/11. They were already global. For starters, they had handheld devices already. They had the internet. The world was open and available to them. In addition to that, going back into the 90s, they were the first age cohort to play more soccer in the United States than play baseball or football. They were into global sports already. They watched MTV, and MTV featured global music. Now, hip-hop is no longer an American form of music. It is a mix, literally and figuratively, of all sorts of strains of global music. In addition to that, these kids are facile with other forms of global music. I grew up wondering, does it have the Union label? Is it American made? They grew up with Louis Vuitton. They grew up with Prada. They grew up with Tommy Hilfiger, United Colors of Benetton. Where something was made was no longer important. It was all one world to them. And then in that context intrudes 9/11. And unlike the greatest generation, which upon being attacked, turned inward and said, America, right or wrong, good versus evil, these already global kids turned outward and became even more curious. How do people who look like us and dress like us and listen to the same music we do and play soccer and all of that stuff, who are just like us, how is it that they do such things? Why do they hate us? We're so much alike. 9/11 had a huge impact on America's first global citizens. Down the road came the second major event, and that's the Great Recession. Itself a global phenomenon. But think about this. Any one of these first globals, 18 to 34, anyone who was 31 years of age or younger has lived their entire adult lives in the middle of a Great Recession. And it is certainly coloring their vantage point. They're no longer as optimistic as they used to be, but I'll tell you something, they're a whole lot more practical than other age cohorts, a whole lot less ideological than other age cohorts who say, I'm a citizen of the planet Earth. It is also 35% of this age cohort who say it is likely that I will live and work in a foreign capital at some point in my life. Likely that that will happen. 33% alone say that it is very important to be fluent in a foreign language. That is double the next age cohort over. That's multiculturalism. When it comes to the attitudes towards other cultures, and we've listed them in a whole series of polls: China, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Arab, Muslim, Latin. Is American culture inherently superior to each of these? This group, 41 to 47%, say American culture is inherently superior to each of those. May not seem like an impressive number, except if you go back to that group that I call the privates. Those are those born between the late 20s and the mid 40s. Upwards of 70% say American culture is inherently superior. Let's look at the workplace for a moment. 85% of first globals, and these are so far ahead of every other age cohort, say that they want their work to make a difference in their world. They want their world to be a better place, and they want their workplace to be that opportunity to help them do that. 71% say that they want to work for an employer that allows them the time to volunteer, to make a difference in the rest of the world. In addition to that, a majority, the only group that has a majority, 62%, say that it is important for them to support a global charity of some sort. They are very, very different from the rest of us. Not only in the fact that we rely on their technical facility, but also in terms of how they use that technical facility. And I think the most impressive thing about our first globals is this. Every one of us in this room, I think, as I look around, maybe you know, but every one of us is steeped in verticalism when it comes to decision making and problem solving. We see a problem, you identify it, and you move it up the chain, further up the chain. The way we normally solve problems is by the time it gets to the third link in the chain, 6 months later, everybody else has forgotten about it, therefore the problem is solved and it's gone. These kids have no sense of verticalism whatsoever. They are horizontally oriented. If there is a problem, then there is a sense of immediacy to resolving that problem. That's the world in which they've grown up. And how do they go horizontal? They go viral. They crowdsource. They crowdfund. There's so much more about them. What they see from marriage is so different than us, however. 17–18% of them say that it is likely that their spouse and themselves will be living in a separate continent during part of their marriage. About 15% say that it is very likely that they may raise a child with the spouses living in 2 separate parts of the earth. The implications that all of this has for our future are enormous. And I've gone to various business groups. Housing is an example. These kids are mobile. 45–46% say, I'd like to plant roots in a community and stay a while. But the overwhelming majority of them say, that's not going to happen. 54% say, more than likely, they will be bouncing from one career to the next. That's the world that they've inherited. That's the combination of the new economy and the Great Recession. But it's also the world that our first globals have internalized in so many ways.